Danny and I will be your instructor for the next 30 minutes roughly. What I want to do today is that I want to teach you how you can improve your photography using a couple of simple tricks and strategies, no matter what kind of camera you use or what your technical knowledge is. That means these tips and tricks will be very beginner friendly, but you can also implement them if you already have been photographing for a while. If you are watching this, then you are probably planning to start your own business or becoming a freelancer. The thing is, we live in a super visual society these days, especially on the internet and on social media. Visual content goes a long way. That's why I believe having a few simple tricks up your sleeve to make your content stand out a little bit more on social media will go a long way for you. As I said, everything you will learn today is relatively simple, and what I want you to be able to do is to walk away from this video and implement these things straight away. Before I launch straight into the content, I should probably briefly introduce myself so that you know who I am and what my relationship with photography is and how I actually know all of these things that I'm sharing with you today, right? You might have guessed it already, but I'm of course a photographer myself. I started my business roughly 3.5 years ago. Obviously, I have to say that I was a photographer for much longer than that. It's that classical story of someone who has a creative passion or hobby and then decides that they will try to make a business out of it to monetize that hobby in order to be able to really spend more time on it. Maybe you even see yourself in that too. Over the past 3.5 years that I've run my business, it has developed quite a bit, and I'm sure this is something that you will see when you go on your own entrepreneurial journey as well. When I started out, I stayed very much in my own little comfort zone, which was photographing pets or animals, specifically horses and dogs. I'm good with animals, so that was the natural thing to do for me, really. However, as I gained more experience and got a little bit braver, I decided to branch out. But eventually, I decided to try a quite different focus. By personal branding, I mean that I would create any sort of photos for them that will enhance their personal brand online, photos that they can post on social media or on their website or when they have speaking engagements somewhere. Often these would be headshots, but more casual than the classic studio in front of a white wall or maybe a black wall headshot that you might know. I would visit these people in their homes. I would incorporate their products into photo shoots. That is also when I discovered that I really enjoyed helping other people like me, people who run very small businesses, and that is probably why I am here today talking to you as well. The thing is that I also discovered that although these photos that I created for these small entrepreneurs and startups were really helpful, they couldn't sustain them in the long run. Specifically with social media, you have to churn out content almost on a daily basis, right? So what most people will do is that they interchange these professional photos that they have taken with photos that they take themselves. And that is perfectly fine, but that is also precisely why I decided to talk about what I'm talking about today. Because when you start doing that, I want to make sure that your images are still good, they're still better. They still look better than somebody who just randomly tried to snap away and share pictures with their friends. I want you to be able to take photos that still represent your brand, although they are DIY. Before I launch straight into the educational content of the video, I should explain to you what it is that I will do and also what it is that I won't do over the course of the next 30 minutes. This video will be for you if you are someone that has been taking photos on whatever device you have available to you and you want to take that next step towards improving the images that you create. This video will be especially for you if you are looking to create a business or a personal brand and want to use your own photographs as part of that process. If you already are an experienced photographer, then I'm not sure this video will have quite as much new content for you. But who knows, maybe just stick with me and you might just get a little refresher of what you've already learned in the past. So what this video will hopefully do is that it will give you some ideas how you can use photography to complement your business or your personal brand online. And what is really important to me here is that I want to encourage you to work with what you've already got. With how accessible cameras are today, most of you will have already been taking photos, even if it's just with your phones, right? What I'm going to do today is that I will share a couple of tips and tricks with you that you can implement immediately, regardless of what device you use, what your prior experience with photography is, and also regardless of your personal creative inclinations. I want to teach you how you can create photos that help you market your brand and show that they were taken by someone who knows what they are doing. However, at the same time, I also feel like I should manage expectations at this point, because there are a couple of things that I won't do in this video. First of all, I won't go into lots of technical detail on how to use a camera and other hardware related to photography. If you want to take the next step and learn about that, I would really encourage you to do so. However, you do need a camera for that has manual options that you can play around with. I simply don't want to assume that everyone has access to that. This video will also not teach you how to use specialized software and edit your photos. Again, I think that is a really worthwhile thing to learn, and I will also drop a few hints and comments on what I think you can look into next if you want to go down that route. However, it took me years to master photo editing, and it would be foolish of me to expect you to learn this within the short time frame that we are given for this video. I think it would take a much longer education for you to get there, but obviously I'm not trying to say that photography is not a viable career. I mean, obviously I might be biased, but I think it's a great career path to go down if you want to do that. And finally, I also want to stress that my message with this video is not that I think that learning how to take better photographs yourself will ever completely replace the need to hire a professional photographer to take your headshot or your personal branding images for your business. I'm also not expecting you to be able to pull off more complex product photo shoots or commercial projects that need images, especially as your business, venture or brand eventually grows. On the contrary, once you are in a position to financially invest in your business, I would totally recommend having a series of professional images taken of yourself, of the key people in your business or your money-making product. This can then be the one headshot that you send to everyone if you're invited as a speaker or you're featuring on a website or something like that. I'm also saying that just in case you are watching this and you already had a professional photo shoot done and paid for that, please don't think you wasted your money or your time. I think these images will still be very valuable to you. I would always recommend that anyway. Personally, I also have my own photos taken by other photographers to use for my own promotion and marketing. Alright, you know what to expect now. So here's this video will proceed from here. I will first briefly talk about equipment. As I said before, this is not a tech video, so I will try to keep that relatively short and brief. And then after that, I will talk you through 4 different strategies or techniques that I think that you can implement straight away to make your photos just stand out a little bit more. Alright, so as I said before, I want you to be able to take action from this video regardless of the equipment that you have at hand or the locations that you can use. Photography equipment is a bit of a funny thing, because on the one hand we actually all carry a camera with us most of the time in form of our phone, right? But then on the other hand, you can spend thousands on cameras and lenses and other equipment that you can use to take photos. I mean, here in this photo you can just see a couple of options. You have a mobile phone on the left hand side or a professional DSLR camera on the right hand side, but there are also compact or bridge cameras and action cameras that are somewhere in between price-wise. And yes, there is a difference in quality. If you want to take professional photographs that you can sell as a product to someone else the way I do, then you do need to make an upfront investment. However, a lot of what you will learn today has to do with composition and how to work with the environment that you have. And the beauty of these things is that you can use whatever you have to start practicing them. And I also want you to be able to take photos no matter where you are, because I know that feeling myself where I am at home and I just think, oh, I can't take any Instagram worthy photos right now because my page is so cluttered and it's just really boring. I'm not an interior designer, it just doesn't look great, it's not photographable. You might be lucky, of course, and watching this in a post-pandemic world. However, that is not my current reality, as I'm sitting here filming this in my living room in the middle of a lockdown. So this is what I have been doing for the past year myself. I have been working with whatever I have readily available. I have been using my dining table as a background for product shots, and I've also sourced differently colored tablecloths so I can always vary it up a little bit. And I use other household items as props and photos, or as an additional element. For example, I have this old wooden chopping board. It's quite used and weathered, but I actually quite like the texture of it. Then I also have this piece that was left over from my kitchen countertop that I also use as a backdrop for smaller items. So in order to take action immediately after watching this video, you really only need 3 things. First, a device that can take photographs, so that can be a DSLR camera, or it can be your phone or a compact camera, anything will do. Second, a clean and uncluttered space where you can work undisturbed, but this can be in your home. Ideally, you should have some natural light available to you, but I will explain that just in a little bit. And third, some bric-a-brac that you can photograph to practice. If you have some products that you're trying to market, that's perfect, you can use those. However, if you don't, just use something that you have around your home. Photograph your food or your drinks. That's what people love to share on Instagram anyway, isn't it? You can just practice documenting your everyday life that way. Alright, we are now done with the introductions and can finally move on to the part that's actually interesting. So today I have 4 aspects to photography, or really photography strategies that I want to share with you and that you can hopefully implement straight as you walk away from watching this video. The first thing that I want you to think of in terms of composition is what you're trying to do is to achieve some sort of balance in the photo. So you're going to have one thing that's the main subject of your photo, and then you might just have some fluff around that assists with drawing the eye or drawing the attention to that main subject of your photograph. I want to stress that photography or photographers did not actually come up with rules for composition. Obviously they are used in art, in painting, in videography, and even in architecture, for example. The 2 major composition rules that you will probably come across if you research this will be the rule of thirds and then the golden ratio, or sometimes referred to as a golden spiral. They are actually somewhat similar, but with some key differences that I will explain to you now. I think they are best explained using some examples. So just a disclaimer, throughout this video I will be using some examples from my own work to just highlight what I mean. These are all photos that are part of my portfolio, photos that I have taken before the pandemic. I know that I have been going on about using simple locations, and I stand by that, but I just thought it would be more interesting for you to actually see it all mixed up a little bit and see some of my work in this video as well. The rule of thirds is fairly simple and straightforward. Imagine you simply divide your image into 3 parts, both horizontally and vertically. You have 9 rectangles, right? You also have created 4 lines. Now the idea is that you simply place elements that are interesting along those lines. So examples may include someone's head, the horizon, these kind of things. This is relatively easily done by just placing the focus or the subject of your image a little bit off center. The golden ratio is not too dissimilar, but this one is actually based on both mathematics and supposedly also nature, because these numbers are replicated in nature. But don't worry, I'm not here to give you a math lesson at this stage. So just take my word for it, and if you are more interested in what this is all about, you can Google the Fibonacci spiral or the Fibonacci sequence in ratio to one another. And this has been used in mathematics, arts, music and poetry, and architecture as well, and unsurprisingly also in photography. Similar to the lines in the rule of thirds, you will have the focal point of your image within this spiral. Using these two rules may come quite naturally to some people, but others have to think about it more actively as they start to frame their photo with their camera. However, I find that as you practice these, you really internalize it and you don't even think about it too much anymore. When you're still learning to compose, I want you to start thinking more intentionally about the way you frame things, and really what you should ask yourself are two questions. First, what is the point of interest or focus in this photo? And second, where am I placing these? I know I was not going to teach you editing, but one really good thing about this is that you can also still crop and frame your photo differently in post-production. So if you don't always think of these rules while you're taking the photo, there's normally a chance to rectify it afterwards. Alright, so this will help you set up a shot. However, there is one more thing that you should keep in mind as you start to take more intentional photographs. And that is that leading lines are very visually pleasing. If you have a line leading up to a subject, then a viewer's eye is immediately drawn to that subject. Some typical leading lines are pathways, roads and walls. But even here in this photo, I used a line to complement the balance of the different components. The shape of the branch as part of the composition is creeping upwards, and it's an interesting shape. It also shapes into the same direction that the robin is looking. But hang on a second, if you have been watching and paying attention, you might have noticed one thing. Look at this photo. The subject is right in the center of the photo, isn't she? Obviously, I have just been telling you about how you are supposed to not do this, but use the rule of thirds as a golden ratio instead. However, rules are of course not set in stone. Once you've actually mastered a rule and learned how to use it, you can also experiment with breaking it. As you can see relatively easily, this photo can still be divided into thirds. And as the model is framed to these leading lines created by the sidewalk, I felt that this composition still works. The viewer's eye is drawn towards her. Roads can make for a great element in composition. They can provide a leading line for you to draw attention towards your subject. However, please never ever take a photo like this without having 2 or 3 spotters around just watching out for traffic and keeping both yourself and the model safe. This photo was taken in a quiet side street, but it was also taken as part of a larger fashion photo shoot, so we had a lot of people around to watch out for cars and for other traffic. Now, the second strategy I want to share with you today is how to handle light and how to use it to your advantage. Trust me, lighting is huge. Using the right amount of lighting can really make or break your photo. At the same time, I know that it's something that will scare a lot of people because they will think they don't know how to use lighting equipment and they don't have any of it and it's really expensive as well. However, worry not. Actually, this strategy will be the most simple, straightforward one that I will teach you today. I really want to encourage you to use natural light whenever you can. Artificial lighting is great when it's dark or you have a kind of grey sky on the day and you don't get a lot of light indoors. However, it also takes years to master and it can be expensive too. And please forget about the little built-in flash on your camera or on your phone. It will just not create very flattering images, unfortunately. If you're indoors, the solution is so simple. Simply move towards a window. So whenever I'm indoors, I just find the biggest window and rearrange my furniture so that I can use it, or I just photograph through an open door. Doorways are great as well. This works for both product photography and portraits. The best part is also that often the sunlight won't shine directly into your window, so you will have a nice soft and filtered light already. That is really important because you don't want any harsh shadows in your photos. If the sun is shining directly into your windows though, you can use something to filter it. If you have white see-through curtains like these, or even just a bed sheet that you can hang in front of the window, this can act as a fantastic filter for harsh or direct sunlight. If you're outdoors, you might also have to move around to find the best spot. If it's actually a cloudy and overcast day, you are in luck in my opinion. I love photographing on cloudy days. The clouds just act as this giant softbox filter basically, so you get a nice, natural, even lighting. If it's sunny, the solution is normally relatively simple. The best thing to do would be to just wait for the golden hour. If you're not sure when the golden hour is in your location, just Google it. It will actually come up with the exact time. If you can't wait that long, then I would suggest that you just find some open shade. So that means shade that is basically on the edge of some trees, behind a hedge, on the edge of the forest, or behind some buildings or walls, something like that. So that you will still have sunlight there, but you won't have any harsh shadows across people's faces, for example from their nose. And finding the best light is also something that you will develop an eye for after a while. I find that by now, when I walk into a new venue or location, even if I haven't photographed there yet, I will immediately start looking around and finding the best light. It's like my brain is starting to scan for all the different spots and locations and light pockets that I want to use. It's actually so bad that I even do it now when I'm not somewhere to photograph, but I'm just there to enjoy myself. My third advice for you is move your feet. And by that you will also move your camera. Doing this will switch up the kind of photos that you get as you start to create a series of photos using the same or a similar subject. And this is where you start telling a story with your photos really. Ideally this would be a story about yourself, your brand, or whatever it is trying to sell to other people. Start creating a variety of photos. So take some close-up shots and then take a step back and photograph the same subject from further away. We would call that a wide angle shot. After each photo you take, just challenge yourself to take like 1 or 2 steps to either side into either direction and photograph your subject from that angle. Actually, in this case, I really want to encourage you to try around a bit for yourself and experiment with the different angles that you can photograph at and decide what looks good and what doesn't. Some good starting points will be photographing something from a first perspective and then from the top down and really from anywhere in between as well. As a rule of thumb, I find that most objects look better when they are photographed from the hip, whereas you would want to be on eye level with people and animals. So in its essence, this idea is really simple. Just move yourself and the camera and try what looks good. The other thing that you can do both in camera and also later in post-production is just to try different types of crops. Depending on how you crop the photo, it may serve a different purpose. Think about how you want to use the photos in the long run. Knowing where you might want to post the photos in the long run could also help. For example, if you think about Instagram, all the preview images are square, right? So if you're taking photos specifically for Instagram, that is something you can keep in mind. Another thing that I like to do when I take product photos is to include a photo like this. Just like this, the photo does not make that much sense. The blank space towards the right-hand side does not serve a purpose. However, if you use this part of a marketing campaign, you can probably put your text right here. Alright, so these 4 strategies are really just the basics, and if you keep these 3 things in mind, the rules of compositions, using the light to your advantage, and moving both your feet and your camera to play around with perspectives, then you will immediately start improving your photos and you will be able to create a varied and interesting series of images. Now the final strategy that I will share with you today that will enable you to take the next step is all about adding context to your photos in order to start more intentional storytelling rather than just snapping away at whatever is in front of you. The first thing I want you to be aware of as you take your own photos and look at other people's photos is the depth of field. Now I know I said that I wouldn't get very technical today, and don't worry, I won't, but I think think I should mention at this point that the depth of field is also something that you can manipulate or at least influence with camera settings. However, even if you are using your phone, you will notice that what you focus on, for example the foreground, is really sharp and then the background is just this blurry effect. We call that blur the bokeh. That is just a technical term for it. The ability to create a sort of really creamy effect will to some extent depend on your equipment and your ability to use that equipment. And therefore, in part, this is advanced learning that we won't cover today. However, even if you are on your phone or another fully automatic camera, you can create an effect like this simply by placing your subject very close to the camera and then placing your background very far away from the subject at the camera. As you do this, think about how the object that you have in the foreground and the main subject of your photo and the background correlate with each other. With that, I just mean remove any clutter or any extremely colorful objects from the background. If you want your subject to stand out, it should ideally be the brightest or the most colorful part of the photo. Another thing I just love to do for context is just to shoot through things. I obviously photograph outdoors a lot, and I just love shooting through trees, through leaves and through flowers. Basically that just means I spend about half of my time with my clients hiding in the bushes somewhere. But this just adds such a nice and soft frame, and I also think it adds depth of field, just like I just mentioned, only the other way around. Here it's the foreground that is blurred. If you don't have any trees available, just use something else. The rule of thumb here is that nothing is too crazy, trust me. You could just use bubble wrap, or you could use playing cards, and of course also people. Finally, when you photograph objects, you can also play around with the scene a little bit. Your object should still be the center of attention, of course, but just experiment with adding or removing different items for context. Here's two very simple examples from food photography. Two small pieces of fudge make the photo look a little bit empty, don't they? However, if you add a cup of coffee, I already feel like you have a much more well-balanced image. Another example are these bay leaves. Bay leaves by themselves on a white background? Not really. I added a wooden chopping board into the mix, but it still didn't really provide any context. However, if you add other spices into the mix, you immediately start thinking about cooking a meal. Whew! That was a lot of stuff to go through in such a short time, wasn't it? Well, I'm hoping that this has given you a lot of new ideas of what you could try to mix up your photography a little bit and improve the photos that you take so that they look like you have taken a more intentional series of images. As you start doing that, you will automatically also start telling stories about yourself, your business, your services and your products. Now the fun part begins. You can go and try to implement these strategies yourself. If this was all totally new to you today, you might want to try one at a time. If you were already familiar with some of the principles of composition and photography in general, then you might just want to go ahead and try to take photos where you implement all of them at the same time. But who knows, there's also a chance that watching this video and playing around with your photography yourself has left you wanting to learn more. If that is the case, I would obviously suggest that you start learning more about how to use your camera, how to use different settings, and how to manipulate those to achieve exactly the result that you want. Basically, that means you will be more in control of the images that you take, regardless of the time of day, the weather, all of that. So if you want to go ahead with that, I would recommend that you start learning the next steps in the following order. First of all, you probably will have to get a compact camera, a DSLR camera, or even a phone that can use manual settings. Then when you have got that piece of equipment, or if you've already got it, you can learn how to manipulate those settings. That means you will have to learn about the triangle between aperture, shutter speed and ISO. Ideally, you will have a photographer teach you about this. The second next big thing is obviously editing. Now, editing or post-production is just so huge. For me, I consider this an integral part of my photography process. It's not just about taking the picture and camera, but it is also about implementing my vision, what I actually saw when I took the photo, not what the camera saw on the computer afterwards. Editing is also a huge thing to learn, so you will probably be learning that as you go, but you can get started with some basic tutorials on YouTube, and you can also have photographers teach you their workflow. Even after I already started my business, I was still learning from other photographers how to edit. The thing is, there are often many words that need to learn, right? So editing is not a straightforward process, but you will find your own workflow eventually. Then after that, it really depends on the direction that you want to go into with your photography. There are a lot of different options of what you could learn next. However, I would usually always recommend taking a live workshop with a photographer where they are there on a set with you, no matter what they photograph, be that people or it could be food or something like that. There are a lot of different thematic workshops that you can pick from. However, being there, doing it yourself and have somebody correct you as you do it can be really helpful. Then really the last thing that I would look into learning is lighting, specifically artificial lighting. Artificial lighting can be really helpful on a dark day or when you're in a studio. However, I think that the advice on lighting that I gave you today will already have some mileage for you. You will probably get quite far without having to use artificial light in the first place. Alright, that's it for me for today. Now the rest is up to you. Go and have some fun with your camera and be creative if you want to. Bye!